see if I can. All right.
All right.
Recording. We're ready for you. Thank you for doing this.
No, my pleasure. So how many people do I have over there? Give me an idea.
15.
15. And you guys are where?
In Destin, Florida.
Destin, Florida. Man, I was there not too long ago. It's a beautiful part of the country out there in Destin. Well, I'm excited to be here with you guys. Jeff reached out to me a little while ago and asked if I would be able. I was in town and everything to be able to do this, and I was, obviously, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this experience with you guys. These retreats are really cool. In my experience, there's a lot of really positive things that come out of these retreats, just from a standpoint of decisions that people make that really have a positive impact on their business. And I hope that's what you guys will do. I hope you'll look at this, and whether it's Jeff talking about ballerinas and his little girl or elite, but that it will spur decision making. There's a saying that says nothing happens till a decision is made. And so one of the things that I always like to caution people on is when we're in these, whether it's a training we're doing or a retreat, it's really easy as you get closer to kind of your why, you remember things, all of a sudden obstacles don't seem quite as big as they used to be. It's really easy to have a lot of really good intentions to change, or really good intentions to do something, or really good intentions to take some of these next steps. But we can't confuse good intentions with decisions. And the way I differentiate between, I think good intentions are good. It's a good starting point, kind of gets the juices flowing, but a decision usually has 3 points in my mind. Direction, meaning I'm going to do this, or here's what I'm going to do, or what I want to start. Then it has a game plan, even just a simple game plan. Here's my first steps, or here's how I'm going to get started, or here's how I'm going to do that. And then it has a piece of accountability. So I think the challenge, again, in my experience, is to come out of this time together at your retreat with decisions, not good intentions, but decisions that have a direction, a game plan, and accountability behind them. And if you do that, then you have a real chance of putting those good intentions into practice and turning those into habits that can really impact your business. And so today, as Jeff and I were talking, he was like, you just go motivate them, Kim. And I was like, okay, we'll see what we can do with that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about something that I like to talk about when I go to retreats. And the reason I like to talk about it is because it's a leadership concept and principle that I think people that are typically at these retreats that have done something to earn that or demonstrate a certain proficiency or skill set and being able to qualify to come to the retreat, I think they're ready for. I've been on the, how do I say this? I grew up around direct sales my whole life. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I'll talk about that in just a second. And I was on your side of the fence, if you will, for a number of years, 10, 11 years. I've built the contact lists. I've talked to people. I've felt the butterflies of inviting someone who I was nervous was going to judge me or misunderstand my intentions. I've failed more times than I probably succeeded. But about 15 years ago, 16 years ago now, I ended up on the corporate side of this industry. And it's really been interesting to me to have this perspective now of having grown up and done it on one side, and now I've spent a lot of time in various capacities on the corporate side. And the reason why I say that to you is because there's a couple things that start to stand out to you as common factors in the people that have success in this type of a model. Everyone's different. Everyone applies their own unique, spin or direction onto their business, which is great. That's what should happen. But there are some common things that you see. One of those things I want to talk to you about, because in my mind, it's probably one of the more important ones. And that is around, and I'm going to share this now, this will kind of pivot me into okay. And that is around the power of choice. Okay. And let me get this out of here real quick. Let me move this. Can everyone see that okay? It says power of choice, own it. We good? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the power of choice. Now, to illustrate this, let me just share something with you. I'll share you an example so you kind of see where I'm going on this. In 1993, there was 1998, there was a study done by Columbia University first of its kind, with 128 fifth graders. Okay. Now, I have a fifth grader. I can't imagine what it was like to try to use 128 fifth graders in a study. It's like herding cats, right? But 128 fifth graders. And what they did is they got them together, and the researchers, one by one, met with each one of these kids, and they gave them a set of very, very challenging puzzles. The puzzles were designed to push a fifth grader's, abilities. And what they did with them is they sat them down, they had them go through the puzzles, and then regardless of how they ended up doing, how they did, the feedback that they were all given was, you did really well. Okay, so they told all the kids, you did well. So in other words, you did a good job. You did a good job with these puzzles. But that's where the similarities changed. With 1/3 of the group, that's all they heard was you did well. That was kind of the control group. With another third of them, they started giving them feedback about how smart they were. You're so smart, and you are such a smart kid that you did those puzzles, and smart kids like you, I mean, they're the ones that always do these puzzles, and so, you can tell that you're smart, and that was some additional feedback that was really driven into their brain. With another third, the last third, they were told that their success was because they worked hard. Man, you did such a good job. You're such a hard worker. Man, your hard work and your effort really made a huge difference in how well you did on that test. I was so impressed with how, when you didn't understand this, you asked this question and you really, really did your best to work hard in that. Okay? Now, what these researchers were testing was, well, actually, let me get to that. So let me not jump ahead. What they did a short time later was they brought these same 120 fifth graders back. And again, they had some puzzles for them. But this time, there was a difference. They allowed the children to choose which puzzles they did, okay? And the puzzles ranged from very easy puzzles from like a second grade level all the way to these really, really hard puzzles that they had done before. And they watched the groups, specifically these two groups. And what they found was the children who were consistently told how smart they were and had that they were smart, told over and over, tended to not do the hard puzzles. They would find puzzles that they could complete, that they could finish, and they would do those easier puzzles. Whereas the children who were told that they were hard workers, the children who were celebrated that their effort, okay, was what made the difference, those were the ones who consistently sought out the harder puzzles, who would ask questions of the researchers, who would try to figure it out, who didn't mind challenging themselves that way, okay? Now, what the heck does this have to do with your business, okay? What they were testing in psychology is called a locus of control. Not locust, like the grasshopper, but a locus of control. Locus meaning, it's the Latin word of meaning location. In other words, where do you put control? In your world, where do you place control? And with the kids who were told that they were smart, what the researchers were doing was reinforcing an external locus of control, meaning the location of control in my life of those things is outside of me. Most fifth graders feel that being smart isn't something you work to do. You're either smart or you're dumb. You're kind of born that way. In other words, it's out of their control. Whereas the kids who were told that it was their hard work, that it was their effort that made the difference, it was reinforcing in that situation what they call an internal locus of control, which is the belief that my choices, my decisions, my actions, the things that I do impact the direction that I take my life, that I take the outcomes, I guess, in my life, okay? So what does that have to do with your business? Using this terminology of locus of control, I have never seen a successful person in this type of a business who does not have a strong internal locus of control. Meaning, someone who embraces the fact that my decisions, my choices, the things that I decide to do are what make the greatest difference between my success and my failure. It's not external forces. It's not things that happen to me. It's not all these other pieces. They might happen, but I put greater priority on what I can control, greater emphasis, and I believe that to be the case. A lot of times we talk about this in terms of mindset. Do we have a business owner mindset? And this might, and again, the danger in these kind of things is they feel kind of touchy-feely, Anthony Robbins, go-to-be, motivational stuff, just for the sake of feeling motivated. But that's not, in my experience, that's not really the case. Guys, how you approach your business, where you believe the control is, okay? Am I giving up my power of choice to other people? Am I giving that up to situations that are out of my control? Am I losing that, or am I controlling the things that I can control? Do I believe that my efforts, the things that I put into place, do I really, really develop that internal locus of control and exert my will on my business? Captain my ship, captain my life, not be a victim of my life, okay? So when we're sitting there, we're thinking about these things, and Jeff talked to you about, a league and all these other things that will tend to push you a little bit. The goals that you're setting for yourself, vision boards, things that will push you a little bit. The temptation sometimes is to abdicate choice. It's to not own our success, to not own our choices, to not own the dreams that we say are so important to us. So what I want to do is I'm going to tell you guys a personal story if I can. But I'm going to do this to highlight 5 things that I think need to happen to help you really develop this internal locus of control. Things that you can do, 5 steps that you can do to help you really own your success, okay? The first one is to have a reason why it matters to you. We talk about having a why all the time, and this is what I'm talking about here, right? We only do things consistently, you guys, that matter to us. So we have to have a reason why your business matters to you. And it's not something that you just create one time and then set on the shelf and look at from time to time. Your why will be a dynamic, evolving, growing thing. As you grow as a person, you're probably every 2 or 3 times, you're going to have to kind of look at that why and make sure that's still relevant. Because if you lose your purpose, you're going to lose your passion. If you lose your passion, you won't be consistent with it. You'll be easily blown over, easily distracted. You will easily abdicate choice for your business. So that why is very, very important for that. And I think the next step in that, part of the reason why vision boards and these other things are so effective or important is because it helps you take that why and it helps tie your future self to it, your goals to it. Everything gets attached to it. You're creating it for the first time in your mind, okay? That's why that's so important. Developing, again, that owner mindset, that internal locus of control starts here. What's my purpose? Why does that matter to me and the person that I'm trying to become? And what goals do I have that tie to that matter, okay? So this is a picture of me when I was a little baby, okay? A very little baby. And you can tell by my parents' clothes that this was many, many years ago, okay? But I will always say that I grew up, I was fortunate, I won the parental lottery, if you will. I grew up in a home where there was not one day that went by when I thought for a second that maybe my parents didn't love me. And I know that's not the case for everybody. And so I try not to ever take that for granted. But that was my reality. I knew that my parents loved me. Family was very, very important to me. And as time went on, as the family started to grow, here you can see me on the kid that's on the ground there, was sticking it up with like his gangster look and the bloody nose. And you can see the Charlie Brown Christmas tree. As we grew up, my dad was a teacher. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad would always apologize to me as I got older in my teenage years that he couldn't provide more for us in terms of material things. But I never felt that way. I knew my parents loved me. I knew my house was a place where love existed. And while we weren't perfect by any means, right, we had our moments. That was never in doubt. And so I grew up as the oldest child. You can see now here is I'm the oldest of 7. So here are 1, 2, 3, 4 of my siblings. We're missing the youngest 2. That's me. That in the corner there, it looks like that's like a flower in my hair. That's a defect of the picture. My parents did not put a flower in my hair before we took that picture. But as I was growing up, the oldest of 7 kids, the importance of family was always just omnipresent and drilled in my head. And almost with my dad, he would to his teaching job, and then he would have at least 1 or 2 other jobs that he would try to help us make ends meet. My mom, so all 7 of our kids, my mom, my parent, my siblings, myself, my siblings, were born within a 10-year period. My mom calls it the lost decade because she was changing diapers or breastfeeding for 10 years, and cloth diapers. She always mentions cloth diapers when I talk about that. But I grew up having kind of almost a third parent role. And I saw myself as being a family person. Family was very, very important to me. I took care of my brothers and sisters. I would think about the day when I would have my own family. And I know that sounds weird for people because a lot of times most kids don't think that way, but I did. And it was important to me. If you were to ask me what one of my whys were in the things that I would do, it was a lot of the normal stuff, but it was also because I wanted to have a good family. That was important to me. So as I got married later on in life, there's my parents again, and my wife and I. She hates this picture. It's the only time she's ever cut her hair short, and she hates it. But anyway, I have it because she's holding our son Caleb just after he was born. When my son Caleb was born, most new parents, first-time parents, are kind of goofy anyway. And I'm sorry if you're a first-time parent. If you are, you're probably goofy. You just don't know it yet. But you're kind of goofy. But I was like super goofy. All of a sudden, it was like this culmination of everything that I was about was happening. I was going to be a dad. This was my family. It was my son. It was my baby boy. It was all those crazy things you think of as parents. It's like he's going to grow up and he's going to cure cancer and bring peace to the Middle East, and then he'll graduate from high school, and then he's going to, all these weird things. He's going to be this multi-sport, and you kind of just put all this weird expectations on this poor little infant. But that was me, and I was just excited to be a dad. I was excited about this. I felt like I'd been preparing my whole life for this moment. I saw myself being this way. Okay? Step number 2. The funny thing about whenever you start to kind of go down this road is it has a way of teaching you what commitment really is about. Okay. So in order to develop this internal locus of control, you have to be committed. When obstacles come at you, you can't let fear and doubt or hurt keep you from believing. And they're going to come. They will happen. It's anything worthwhile in your life, you guys. If your purpose and the why and your ability to kind of really internalize that and control that, all that really matters to you, it will be challenged. And expecting it not to be challenged is just setting yourself up for disappointment. It's going to be challenged because it's going to force you to grow, and it's going to force you to grow in ways that you need to grow to make it happen. And it's not always going to be easy. It's not going to be pleasant. Okay, but it's in that moment that the shaping of it takes place, that developing those habits of what are the things that I can control and developing that internal locus of control, owning my success for myself. That's how that starts to really take shape, and how you start to differentiate yourself from other people in the world who just kind of let life happen to them. So the goals you're thinking about right now, the goals that you're going to set for yourself, whether it's a lead or other things like that are maybe goals that are tied to your ultimate why, where you're trying to go, those are going to be challenged. They will be challenged, but how you respond to that is what matters. So here is there's a picture of my son Caleb when he was just about 2 years old, just over 2 years old actually, and my wife. I was coming home from work, and I remember I'd gone to school that morning. I was at work that afternoon. I was driving home, and I was just really excited to get home because we had started to teach Caleb how to shoot baskets on one of those little Nerf hoops, right? We had put it down on kind of his level on our little entertainment center we have there in our apartment, and I was teaching him how to shoot hoops, and I remember thinking I was excited to go home and shoot hoops with Caleb. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I get out of the car, and I'm walking down. We kind of live in one of those little fourplexes, right, where there's like 2 homes on the top and 2 homes on the bottom. So we're in the bottom right-hand unit, and I walked down the little stairs, and I opened the door, and I was looking for Caleb, and I turned to my right, and my wife is sitting on our couch, and she's crying. Now, ladies, I don't know if there's any guys in the room, but few things in this world will scare a man more quickly than coming home and unexpectedly finding your wife crying. Instantly, I was like, okay, what did I do? Did I screw something up? What did I forget? And I was worried about that. And I looked at her, and I said, babe, what's wrong? And she goes, I think Caleb might be sick. Like, what do you mean? He might be sick. He's fine. Now, look, we had noticed that Caleb had been, slow to walk. But, everyone talks about how the first kid's always slow to walk because your parents always carry him, all that stuff. And we knew that, he wasn't talking as much as most 2-year-olds. It really wasn't. But then you hear all these stories like how Einstein didn't talk till he was 3. And I'm like, look, I'm not that worried about it. I mean, he's just figuring stuff out. He's got like the theory of relativity and stuff kicking around in his head, right? And we had found a way to explain all of these pieces, but also in the back of our head and in our heart was this little voice that was saying, be ready. Be ready. Be ready. So when my wife said this to me, that little voice started coming. And I was like, and I asked her, I said, so what do you mean? Why do you say that? Well, we had just gone the previous day to a family kind of get together on her side of the family. Where all her cousins and aunts and uncles that lived in the area got together. And we knew her one aunt. We had talked to her before, and she had 2 boys. And we knew both of them had some kind of a special needs, special disability. We didn't know what it was. But we knew that we saw them, that they were there and everything, and we were talking to her a little bit. Anyway, she says, well, and her name was Paula, and she said to me, she goes, well, Paula came over this afternoon. And I said, yeah. And she said that at the family get-together, she was watching Caleb. And she noticed that some of the same symptoms her boys had. He seemed to be kind of showing some of those symptoms. The cute little arm flapping that we thought was so funny, him trying to be a bird. The way he'd fixate on things that were spinning. Little things like that we thought were kind of cute idiosyncrasies of him. And when she said that to me, the thought in my mind was, be ready, here it comes. And I felt my world start to turn. And she looked at me and she goes, she said it was something called Fragile X. And I'd never heard that term before. She goes, it's something like, it's Fragile X. And I said, what's that? She goes, I don't know. But as she said Fragile X, again, I felt my words start to turn. I was fighting it, you guys. I was like, no way. This is my boy. This is my son. This is our family. This is not going to happen. And I was fighting it. And I could just feel it just turning on me. And that moment, now you guys, I don't know if you've had those moments when you just know, like, my life 30 seconds ago is no more. This is now a new reality for us. And she was crying, and I held her, and I was trying to be brave, and I just said, babe, I said, I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure it's nothing. Did she know for sure? No, she didn't know for sure. She just wanted to give me, just give me a heads up. And I said, I'm sure it's nothing. It's not a big deal. So I'm trying outwardly to be brave for my wife. Inside, I'm having all these feelings, and I just told her, I said, okay, so we need to figure this out. And so this is going to date me, okay? Because then I said, I got to go to my parents' house so I can get on the internet. Okay, so for some of you in this room, this is a very foreign concept, okay? So, when I was in my 20s, internet wasn't everywhere yet. And so I got in my little car and I drove over to my parents' house, which is about 10 minutes away. And I don't remember really anything on that drive other than just praying. Please, Heavenly Father, no. Just please no. Please no. No, please no. And trying to rationalize and to explain how I tried to be a good kid my whole life, how I want to be a good father, how this is important, all these things to bless my wife and bless my son, and all these things I could do. And I got to my parents' house, and I just jumped out of the car, and I ran in the house, and I ran down the stairs. My mom saw me. She said, hey, Kim, and I didn't even acknowledge her. I just went down, and I booted up her Windows 98. Okay, this is going to be dating me again. I opened up her net zero connection because we didn't want to pay for the internet when you could get it for free. They had the fast modem. It was the 56K modem, that one. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but that was my internet experience. I opened up Netscape, okay, and went to Yahoo, and I searched Fragile X symptoms in children. And I clicked search, and the first thing that came up, I clicked on it, and after it loaded, it took a little bit. After it loaded, I remember just kind of reading through the top, genetic this, blah, 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 and then it got down to symptoms, and there was bullet points. And I remember sitting in that chair, and every bullet point was like someone had decided to just follow my son around for a couple weeks and just describe him in bullet points. And every bullet point that I read just made my world feel heavier and heavier and heavier. And I didn't really realize it, but I had started to cry. I was sitting there, and tears were kind of coming on my face, and I'm looking at this and going, like, I was numb. Like, I don't remember feeling anything. My body was just tingling, and I could not wrap my head around what was happening. I just knew that I was terrified. And my mom came around the corner after a few minutes, and she saw me and she said, "Kim, what's wrong?" And I remember looking up above the computer monitor at her, and I just said, "Mom, he's sick." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Caleb's sick, Mom, he's sick." And I just started pointing at the monitor. And my mom came around the back of the chair, and I was just like, "Mom, he's sick." And I was pointing at the bullet points, and she just kind of leaned over. She wrapped her arms around me over the back of that chair and just held me and read those things, and she started to cry. I apologize, you guys. And I went home that night. I told my wife, or I went home that afternoon after I was done with this, and my mom and I talked about it, and I was like, but we don't know for sure, and it might just be a coincidence. And I went home, and on the drive home, I tried to get myself all prepared, but in my heart, my world had shifted, and I knew it. Even if I wasn't willing to quite admit it, I knew it. And I walked in my house, and I told my wife, I said, "We need to probably get him checked out." Kind of explained to her the symptoms, but also was like, "You know what? It's probably nothing. It's probably this. It's coincidence." They even said in the website that just because they do this doesn't mean they have Fragile X. And so we called the next day. We made an appointment at the university hospital up north from us where this kind of genetic testing was done. We went up there. We met with a geneticist, and they explained to us that because it's genetically inherited form, and we talked about our cousin that probably came through my wife's side, that there was a one in 2 chance, a 50% chance that every one of our children could have this because it's transmitted on the X chromosome. And coming from my wife, so they'll either get the one that has a disability, the X chromosome that has a disability, or the X chromosome that doesn't have it. And that put another layer on us because my wife was pregnant at the time. She was 6.5 months pregnant with our second child. And so we had Caleb give a blood test, and a couple weeks later, they told us, the nurse had called ahead and said, "Hey, the results are in. The doctor's going to call you this afternoon." I got off work early. I came home. We were sitting around the house waiting for the phone to ring. The phone finally rings. My wife looks at the caller ID. It's the doctor's office. She picks it up, and she says, "Hello? Yeah, this is Katie." "Okay." The doctor gets on the phone. She says, "Hi, doctor. So-and-so." "Okay. Okay. No, that's okay. No, that's okay. Well, let me talk to my husband. We'll set up a time to come see you." She hangs up the phone. She looks at me, and she just starts crying, and she nods her head. The kid had Fragile X. It's hard to describe what it's like to go through something like that if you've never gone through it. But it changed. It shook me to my very core. My why, my vision of this key part of who I was being destroyed in my mind. And 2.5 months later, my daughter, Caitlin, was born. And as she was born, they pricked her heel. They did a blood test. And they called us a couple weeks later with the same news that my daughter, Caitlin, had Fragile X syndrome as well. And I would love to tell you guys that during this time, I was this strong man, confidently leading and helping my wife and the super support, but I wasn't. I was a dork. I felt I was lost. We would go to these early intervention classes, and I would just sit there the whole time, and I would just be numb. I wouldn't want to listen to it. I couldn't accept what was going on. I'm a fairly spiritual person. And I couldn't pray because every time I knelt down to pray, the pain would just come back, and I would cry, and I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel anything anymore. I tried to pull myself away from it all. We would go to the playground in our little complex area where the apartments were, and there was all these other young kids, and I remember being, and this part's not, I remember being embarrassed as I watched my son Caleb out there playing. Because all I could see now, instead of just months before, all I saw was this beautiful, amazing child who had this limitless potential. And now all I could see was lack and deficiency. And oh my gosh, look what those other kids do and he can't do. And I was resenting other 2- and 3-year-old kids and their parents that were so happy for their perfect kids and all these things that it just right now, I'm not proud to admit, but that's where I was. I was lost. I remember one day we had gone to an early intervention appointment for Caleb. And I had left that, and I was just like kind of in this throwing myself a pity party, inviting the whole world to come to it. And I went to work, and I walked into to where I worked, and I sat down at my desk, and I was just thinking about this thing, and it was, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, and I can't believe that, oh my gosh, woe is me. And then I had an experience that I probably didn't merit, but looking back on it, I think that I had, even though I wasn't going as fast as I hoped I had gone or acted the way I hadn't quit on myself. I remember I sat down, I was looking at the computer, and all of a sudden this voice, like where it was right over my shoulder, just hit me, and it just said this: your whole life, their whole life, there will be people that will doubt them, who will tell them things that they can't do. You are their dad. You cannot be one of those people. Now act like it. And all of a sudden, like, it was like this fog just lifted off my mind. And I was like, I'm their dad. Like, I'm their dad. Like, I'm their father. Like, I know they've got these things. I know they've got these challenges. We didn't anticipate these things. But you know what? I'm their champion. Like, I've got to be the guy that champions them, that sees them, that helps them get the best. And all of a sudden, all these things I should have been feeling all along, I just wasn't. I got it. I felt it. I remember I went home that night and I told my wife, I said, babe, I'm back. She was like, what do you mean? I kind of told her the experience, and she was like, well, thank you. Welcome back, you moron. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I apologize. And all this stuff. And I was just like, I'm back. And I looked at my kids, and this is a picture about the time when all this was happening. And I realized I had these two beautiful spirits in my house now that I had been blessed to have. And that was my job to be their dad. And yep, you know what? This wasn't what I thought it was going to be. This is what it was I planned on it being. But this is what it was. And I was just going to love it. And so when we would go to early intervention things, I wasn't like apathetic. I'm like, what are we doing today? We're doing sign language. Okay, great. We're going to be the best water talkers we can do, Caleb. We're going to water this week. We're going to shape sorters. We're going to shape sort like crazy and celebrate the fact that he could put the green circle in the little round hole in the shape sorter instead of triangle one, and celebrating that. We would go out to the playground, and I'd be like, I would watch my son, and he'd walk around, he'd say more, and I'd be like, see, my kid, he's doing sign language. Here you do sign language, my kid's doing sign language, doing more. And it wasn't like a comparison thing, but I was just so proud of celebrating the things that he was doing well, the things he was progressing in. And when I looked at the other kids, I was so happy to see what they were doing well, and I wouldn't feel that poison was gone out of me because I had re-embraced that purpose, that why, and I realized it didn't depend upon what other people did. It was just me and Caleb. It was me and Caitlin. It was us. It was our family. That's where it mattered. What happened outside of that, good for them, okay? But what mattered most was what we did right here. So that why will be challenged. When that why gets challenged, one of the things that I learned in that is now in step 3, is you have to, as you decide to go after something and to really own your choices and to really develop this internal locus of control, the key thing to do is to say, what are the things that I can control to get your goal of elite, to get your goal, whatever your income goal happens to be for your family, whatever the goal happens to be, what are the things that you can control? And once you identify those things, you go. You don't wait. You don't think about it. You don't analyze it till you've got every T crossed and every I dotted, because that never happens. You own it and you start to go, because in the going is where the learning happens. All this other stuff prepares yourself. All this other stuff qualifies you to do it, but the actual growth takes place in the moving. And the hard thing about this is the part that requires lots of leaps of faith, where you're going to be stepping into unknowns. And the great thing with leaps of faith is that's how you build faith in yourself. When you take leaps of faith yourself, you build faith in yourself that you can take those steps. A lot of people who live very mediocre lives will tell you that that's not right, that that's too risky, that you shouldn't do that. But guys, I've never met a successful entrepreneur who doesn't know how to take responsible leaps of faith. and doesn't have enough confidence in himself to do that. And that doesn't happen without doing it. That doesn't happen with that first jump. I think about leaps of faith of like in Indiana Jones, and I think it was the Temple of Doom, right? When he had to go through to get the Holy Grail, and he had to go through those different tests. Those of you who haven't seen the movie have no idea what I'm talking about. But he gets up to this one trial, and he comes up to this ledge, and at the edge of this ledge is this bottomless pit. And across this chasm is another ledge on the other side, and there's nothing in between them. And the name of this test is this leap of faith. And so he sits there and he tries to figure out what to do. He doesn't know what to do. Can I jump over? Can I use my little whip to swing across? I don't know what I can do. Okay, I'm just going to have to stick my foot out and just step. And as he does that in the movie, you see him stick his foot out, and he just takes this step, and you can see his momentum. If there's nothing there, he's going to fall into this pit, but he has to believe that it's there. And as his foot comes down, it hits this invisible bridge in the movie. And as his foot makes contact on that, he can then see the bridge that was there that he couldn't see before. That's what these leaps of faith can feel like sometimes. You feel like I've never hit a leap before. I've never done these things before. Can I do this? Do I have the courage to take these leaps of faith on my own? Do I have the courage to believe in myself to be able to do that? It doesn't matter what's happening around me, other people, that kind of stuff. No, do I have the courage to do that? So my wife and I were confronted with one of these leaps of faith. So when Caitlin was about 2 years old, my wife and I always had a rule that we would never, before we start having kids, we said, look, she's the second oldest of 8 and I'm the oldest of 7. We knew we weren't going to have that many kids, but we were like, what we'll do is after the child's a year old, the baby, then we'll start thinking about if we want to have more kids. Well, with our first 2 children having special needs, we were real hesitant. But at the beginning of around when Caitlin turned 2 years old, we started to kind of get these little feelings independently, but both of us, that our family wasn't done yet, that we were supposed to have more kids, and this scared the crap out of us. We were, our batting average and the whole genetic lottery here was not great. We knew that there was a 50% chance that any child we have would have this same disability. We thought about, are we being irresponsible? Are we being reckless? Can we have the ability to handle a third child with disabilities? We went back and forth and all this kind of stuff. And in the process, we're like, okay, well, let's look what our options are. Let's see what we can do. And we started looking at adoption because we just kept feeling like we're supposed to have more kids. So we looked at adoption. We looked at those different avenues that were there. And there were some real promising ones, but because we already had 2 kids and the different situations, we couldn't get. Anyway, for a long story short, there was some complications there. We were trying to figure those things out. And one day I came home from work. For a guy, weird things always happen. The crazy things always happen after work, right? So I came home from work, and my wife says to me, she goes, I think I have the answer, and I feel really good about it. I said, what is it? She goes, it's pre-genetic diagnosis in vitro fertilization, PGD-IVF. And I was like, what did you say? She said, pre-genetic diagnosis in vitro fertilization. I was like, and she started explaining it to me, how they would basically harvest her eggs, as weird as that sounds to say that still to this day, but they would harvest her eggs. They would test which one had the disabilities, which one didn't. They would fertilize the ones that didn't, and then they would do in vitro fertilization and implant those in my wife. And I was like, they can do that? And she was like, yeah. And I'm like, that sounds so cool and so expensive. Okay. I was like, and you have to keep in mind, I just barely graduated from college, was just barely starting my career, just barely getting going with a real job, and so we said, okay, we're going to look into this. Money was tight for us. We were, just what most people are when they first get out of college, and so we did some investigation. Make a long story short, we found out that the local, again, the same genetic wing of the hospital where we went and did the testing also could do this procedure, but they would have to fly in a specialist from the East Coast to do it, and that the total cost was just over $26,000, and it's not covered by insurance. And so my wife and I, we prayed about it, and we thought about it, and we said, okay, we think this is what we're supposed to do, and so we went about it. And you want to talk about leaps of faith. So my parents had given us an old beat-up pickup truck, and her parents had given us an old Toyota Camry. We sold both of those cars, and we bought a salvage title minivan so that we have enough room in the car to move the kids around. It was dirt cheap, okay, dirt cheap. And I rode my bike to work. we went through our house, and anything that wasn't required to entertain children or sustain life, we sold on eBay. In fact, I have an eBay account that I have not used since the early 2000s. That's all we did. It was just all the stuff we sell on eBay. And we, for almost a year and a half, almost 2 years, about a year, little over a year and a half, we lived as cheap as you could possibly live. How can we do this? How can we make this happen? How can we do this? How can we control those things we can control? Well, I'll tell you what, we ate like crap. I mean, I ate pasta and ramen noodles for almost a year and a half. I mean, we ate the cheapest, nastiest food. We didn't have cable. We didn't have internet. We would do things like unplug the refrigerator at night so the power bill would be lower. We never ran our AC. Anything that we could do to save money at this time. And after a little while, we got pretty good at predicting about how much, after we sold everything that we could sell, and we got pretty good at comparing or getting an idea about how much money we would save every single month. And the time was coming when we had to basically agree to get this guy from the East Coast flown in. We had to make a decision about 4 months out, okay? And so we decided on a date. Here's when we're going to do it. The specialist got his schedule squared away. He was going to come out. It was committed. Now this thing's happening no matter what. We're just under 3 months, about 3 months away from this happening. When I'm looking at how much we're saving and I'm going, we're going to be short by like $2,500. And I don't know how I can squeeze more water out of this rag right now. And I'm sitting there at work one day trying to figure out what we're going to do. And I read something on the internet about how a local kid was trying to raise money for this charity that he was affiliated with from his family. And so what he did was he ran this 10K, and he got businesses to sponsor him for every K, I guess, of the race. And all of a sudden this light hit my head. I was like, I've got legs. I can run. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run. I'm going to run a race. And what I'm going to do is I'll get people to sponsor me. And I'm like, okay, so you have to keep in mind something, guys. I'm a baseball player. Baseball is a beautiful game. You run 90 feet and you call timeout. Catch your breath, okay? I had never done a 1K, a half K, a 10K, a 20K. I didn't even know what those were. I was like, why don't they just call them miles? I have no idea what a K is, right? And I'd never done anything like that. But I got so this is going to happen. I called up my dad, and I was like, Dad, you want to do this with me? Because now if you do it and I do it, that's like double the miles that we can do. And he says, absolutely, Kim, whatever you need to do. And so the next thing was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm thinking, man, I need to get the biggest race I can possibly get so I can get the most money from this. And the biggest race that I could think of was a marathon. Now, guys, like I said, I've never run a race. I don't know what that really entails. So I look and I did some research, and I found that there was a marathon that was happening in 2 months in Idaho, okay, within driving distance of my house. And in fact, I had an uncle that lived up there. I could stay at his house, but it was close by. I wouldn't have to buy airfare or anything like that. 2 months away, I could drive. I'm like, perfect, okay? So I created this flyer. And it says, how can fat man run marathons? Because my dad was like, I'm not doing the full marathon, but I will walk the half marathon, because he was smarter than me. I'm like, okay, whatever, Dad. So I did this flyer called Can Fat Man Run Marathons? And as you can see by that picture right there holding Caleb, I had eaten pasta and rice and other inexpensive, cheap crap carbohydrates for a year and a half. I was pushing 300 pounds, okay? And so, but I printed out this flyer and I handed it out to everybody, and I got, within about 6 days, enough people committed to it that I could pay for the procedure. Now the only problem was I had to run the marathon. And so I would go, I have to confess something to you guys. I wasn't the smartest kid in this situation. Okay, I'm still in my mid to late 20s at this point, And in that point, you still feel like you're the same athlete you were in high school, okay, even though everything's indicating other words like, hey, in high school you were 200 pounds. Now you're 285 pounds. There's a little bit of a difference there, right? And so I would go out and to train for this marathon again. Guys, I've never done this before. Okay, I remember I went and I looked at some training guides, and I'm like, 3 months, 6 months, I don't have that much time. I was like, okay, so, and I was like, man, that's just way too much running. As I was looking at them, I'm like, I don't need to run that much. I would just put on my Mizuno cross trainers with my long white cotton socks. I would put on my old basketball pants and my cotton t-shirt that I cut the arms off of, and I would just go run until I got tired, and then I would come home. No pacing, no real judging of how far distance was. I would just try to go a little bit farther each day. That was how I trained. And with 2 months, there's not a whole lot of time to train in 2 months, okay? But my why was strong, and I wanted to do this, okay? So now that takes us into, let me get rid of this one. Step 4. When you start to control the controllable and you're putting these pieces and you're moving and you're doing things, you're going to make mistakes. Okay, you have to be patient with your imperfections because you're always charting uncharted waters, guys. When you're going to go after a leap for the first time or premiere or whatever big goal you've got for yourself, you've never done that before. So as you make these leaps of faith, as you push yourself, you're not going to be perfect. The secret is to embrace those imperfections, those goof ups as part of the process. Not as a judgment on who you are or what you're trying to do. You have to really choose to continue relying on your purpose behind that. That's, again, that internal locus of control, aligning my choices to my outcomes that I want. So race day comes a couple months later. And I got to tell you guys, we drove up the night before. I stayed at my uncle's house. We went to, and I remember getting my race packet, like the email said, and I saw that I had to be like at this school parking lot at 3:30 in the morning. I'm like, why the crap do I have to go so early for a stupid race? But anyway, we show up, we get there, and we pull in the parking lot. Those of you who run marathons, maybe you saw that same thing, okay? But we get to the parking lot, and my dad and I get out of the car, and it takes me about 1 minute to realize that I am in trouble. Because as I'm looking at these runners, first of all, these people are like 20% torso, 80% leg. Okay? They all have like these like aluminum foil blanket looking things on, which would have been really nice because I was freezing. They have like these super sweet like running shoes, and they've got like these super shorty McShort shorts, almost embarrassingly short shorts they're wearing, and the ankle socks, and I'm standing there in my Mizuno cross trainers that I've had for like 6 years, my long white cotton socks, my old basketball shorts, my cut off cotton t-shirt, and a golf visor that my dad let me use for the race so I wouldn't get as much sweat in my face. It was definitely one of those situations where one of these kids is not like the other, one of these kids is doing his own thing type thing. That was me. And I'm looking at my dad and I'm like, okay. And then we get on the bus. And by the way, there were 2 buses. That'll tell you how big this marathon was. Okay, I didn't realize it was the first time they'd ever run this TETON damn marathon. And there were 2 buses, and one of them was only half full. There was maybe 60 people in this race, maybe 60 people. So we get on the bus, we sit down on that cold vinyl that's pinching my legs because it's cracked. And as we start to plow the parking lot, the driver says, we're going to be following 80% of the course you're going to be running coming back down. And I'm like, oh, okay. And after like 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, I am screwed. Like, I remember looking out and just watching the lines just go by on the road, tick, 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 with a glow of like the yellow turn signal light. And I remember just thinking, I have never ran this far in my life. Like all of a sudden, all the inadequate training that I put in is hitting my like consciousness right now. And I remember looking at my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I said, I don't know if I can do this. Dad, I don't think I'm ready. Dad, I don't think I can do this. And he just kept patting my knees like, you're going to be okay, son. You're going to be okay, son. You're going to be okay, son. So we get off the bus, and apparently they want you to get there at 3:30, so they get you up early enough to the starting line so you can wait up there for 2 hours. So I got up there, and I waited for ever freezing my butt off in Idaho. And when the time came, they said, okay, everyone line up on the starting line. And we get up there, and my dad, who's ever my coach, just starts going, Kim, just go. Like, don't be afraid, Kim. Just go after. When that gun goes off, you just go. Go. Don't wait for me, because we've been talking like, hey, maybe we'll run together. He's like, no, you just go. You don't wait. And by the time he's done giving me his pep talk, I am so amped up that when that gun goes off, I like start sprinting at like Carl Lewis speed. I was like, wait, okay? Again, the ignorance of running the marathon. And I'm probably do this for the first 2 or 3 miles. I'm like, I am just running. My heart rate is through the roof, and I'm just running, okay? But even at that speed, which is my fastest, an interesting thing happened. There were and this time I called them the gazelles, okay? There were all the people that weren't built like me. They were still way ahead of me. Like, I couldn't see them. They were like way far ahead of me. And then there was a handful of people, I want to say like 5 or 6 people, that in my mind at the starting line I kept calling them the knee brace brigade, because they're the guys that have the knee braces on, the headbands on, and they were just like, you know, they were not really concerned about running this race in any type of speed. And I was between the gazelles and the knee brace brigade by myself. It was just me, okay? There's some pictures here to kind of show you that. So you can see there's my cutoff t-shirt, my golf visor, my white cotton socks, and my basketball shorts. I'm literally running this marathon like by myself. And guys, it's goofy. I know you're not gonna understand, but it's like little things just to show my inexperience. As I'm running, I remember as I came up like on the 2nd mile marker, and it was like that mile was like posted in the side of the road. And I thought, that is so cool. Like, they can tell you how far you've ran. They put those little mile markers right there. That is awesome. Like, I was just so impressed that they did that, right? And when you came up to like the first aid station, I was like, man, look at this is so well organized. Look, here's the deal. There was still traffic that would pass us on these roads. They didn't close the roads. We were told to run on the shoulder, right? But this is also, you know, it's Idaho, Rexburg, Idaho. There's not a whole lot up there anyway. And so we're running, and I at this point I've throttled way back now. Now I'm kind of just this jog, like just trying to kind of keep myself going. It was almost at mile 13. It was just after mile 12. I was running, and again, I'm by myself, and I look ahead, and the road just kind of takes this nice gentle bend to the right. I'm like, okay. And in my mind, I'm like, that's just the way you're supposed to go. Now, as I come up on that bend, I notice that there's also like this little hairpin turn that goes off to the left. But in my mind, like, the road doesn't go that way. It's like supposed to go to this right-hand turn. So I just start going down this road, and I'm running, and I'm just jogging along, and I'm tired because I ran too fast at the beginning, and I'm just trying to just keep my head about me. And all of a sudden, I'm like, man, where's that mile 13? Like, where's that 13-mile marker? And I can't see it. I'm like, man, it's been a little bit of time. Like, I think I should have seen it by now. And I'm like, and I literally, guys, I had this thought in my head. You're all going to laugh at me and think less of me as a person. But as I was trying to grapple with why the mile 13 mile marker wasn't there, I was like, you know what? It's probably like hotels. Hotels never have a 13th floor because it's unlucky. Put that 13 mile marker out because it's unlucky. So that's not going to be there. So I was like, I had figured that out in my mind. I'm like, okay, I must keep running. I'm running. And all of a sudden this white car passes me, and they wave, and I wave back, and I'm like, okay, I just keep running. And it was probably, I don't know, a good 5 or 6 minutes later, this white car's coming back towards me, and I realized that they're not waving at me. They're doing this. There's a big difference between this, all 5 fingers, and just 1 finger. And they roll down their window, and in the version of a Rexburg drive-by shooting, they say, hey, you're going the wrong way. And then they drove off. I was like, what? I'm going the wrong way. And I remember, you guys, literally, I sat there for a second, and I felt so stupid. What kind of an idiot goes the wrong way in a marathon? And I sat down on the tar, on the asphalt on the road, and I was like, I don't even care if a car hits me right now. Like, I started getting emotional. All of a sudden, I was so tired, and my legs hurt because I freaking was an idiot, and I ran so hard at the beginning of the race. And honestly, I had trained, and this was farther than I'd ever run in my entire life, and I'm not even halfway, and I went the wrong way, and this is dumb. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is, and I know, you guys, that everyone who said they were sponsoring me would have just, were going to give me the money, whether I finished the race or not. In fact, they would have just given it to me had I asked them. I wanted to feel like I was earning it. And I thought, you know what? I'm done. Like, I'm just going to, and then I laid down on the road, literally just like tempting, fate to just put me out of my misery, hit me with a car. And I remember looking up at the sky, and it was a blue sky with some clouds. And I remember looking at the white clouds, and I was just like, as I'm going through all this thought, I was like, why am I here? And then I remembered that day at work, when I remembered what it was to be a dad. And I was there because I had been dealt a hand that I hadn't expected. But what dads do is what dads do. Dads do what needs to get done for their family. And in a situation where I couldn't control the fact that my kids had this disability, I couldn't control that this was now a reality of our family, I could control this. I could control this. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I could. For my family and for us, for my why, for my purpose behind me. And it was hard and it wasn't easy. And it was what I could control. And so I got up off that asphalt and I started working my way back. And every step back, you guys don't think that I wasn't mad at myself. I've already ran this way. I'm rerunning what I've already run. In fact, it's not even getting me any closer to the finish line. It's just more energy wasted doing all the stuff to get. And sometimes even when our business goes down, we make these wrong turns on our business front. We have to kind of go back and, oh my gosh, I'm growing, but I'm still not where I used to be. And we start playing all these games of mind. That's the kind of stuff that I was doing. I'm doing this all in my mind. I'm just like, and I have to keep remembering that I've got to get the why I was running that. And as I got back, sure enough, as I got back to that road, that someone had knocked down the little arrow that was pointing to that hairpin turn. But I had made a choice, hadn't I? Sitting on that road, I had made a choice. That internal locus of control. This is the thing that I was going to do for me, for my business. I was going to run. I was going to jog. Okay. And as I got around that hairpin turn, I looked ahead of me just a little ways, and there was the knee brace brigade. And I was like, now my mid-20s, late 20s competitive juices started flowing. I was pissed because I was the last guy in this race. I was last. I mean, even the guys who looked like they had no business being out of a wheelchair were beating me, okay? And so as I looked up at them, all of a sudden these kind of start coming, and I look and I notice as you go through that hairpin turn, as it starts to level out, what it does is it goes through these three kind of like little hills. It goes up, plateaus out, up 3 times, and then it goes kind of like to this top plateau where you start keep going. And I have this thought in my brain, you know what? If I run as fast as I can up those hills, I'm going to catch and pass those knee brace brigade guys, because those guys are going to be like army crawling up that hill. And so again, smart kid that I am, I start running like hard, like chariots of fire, push yourself, let's just go, give every motivational thing I could think about it. I'm running. And after the first hill, I've passed them. And I'm heading up that second hill, and I'm trying to get some distance between them. And halfway up that second hill, all of a sudden it feels like someone takes like a hot knife and stabs it in the outside of my left knee. And I was like, ouch. And every time I put my foot down, it kept shooting pain up and down my knee. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I keep thinking maybe it'll just go away, but it doesn't. Every step that I put in, it hurts more and more. It gets more painful every time I step. And I look up at the top of this third hill after the second one. I'm going to get ready to go up the third one. I look and I see there's my wife. Oh, okay, there's my wife. And she's up there with the digital camera. And the reason why I remember this is because she took this picture. And I remember having this conversation with her up that third. By the way, you can see the knee brace brigade behind me, right? And I remember telling her, because at this point with my knee, I'm kind of like doing this little like giddy up when I'm running, right? Or jogging. And I remember telling her, tell me when you're going to take the picture, because I wanted to make sure I was looking like I was running normally, right? So she was like, 3, 2, and I'm like, and so that I remember taking that picture. And I was really excited to have her at the top of the hill because my wife graduated in sports medicine. And so she's going to be doing like some Mr. Miyagi thing, put her hands together, and fix my knee, and my knee's not going to hurt anymore. So I get to the top of the hill, and the first thing out of her mouth is, where have you been? And I was like, I went the wrong way. And she's like, what do you mean you went the wrong way? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about this right now. My knee hurt. And so I explained to her what's happening, and she's like, this and that, and she starts testing stuff and moving things around, and she goes, it looks like you probably hurt your IT band. Came to find out later that I actually torn it a little bit, okay? And she goes, Kim, let's just be done, because I was hurting. She goes, we're done. She goes, look, the van's right there. And she kind of look over, and now all of a sudden, there's the van is like 30 feet away from me. Like, I can just go, get in the van, and everyone's going to be like, man, you did your best. You went the wrong way, but you didn't quit. And then you hurt your knee, and then we totally get it. Like, good job. And they would celebrate me making that choice. But I'd already made the choice, sitting by myself on that road just a few miles back. By the way, come to find out later, we went and measured it. It was actually 2 miles the wrong way, a little over 2 miles. I had added almost 5 miles to my marathon. And so at the top of that hill, I told my wife, I said, okay. I said, no, I'm going to go. And she's like, babe, don't do it. You're just be careful. And sometimes people want to do this. So the people that love us most will try to help us, save us from what they view as pain, right? Don't do that. You know what? No, don't do that business thing. Don't be careful with that. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about there. So I said, babe, I got to keep going. And so I went. But I wasn't running and I wasn't jogging. I call it my accelerated pimp strut because I was kind of like this, right? And because my knee hurt. And the bad thing is when you run like this for a long time, all of a sudden your hips hurt, your other ankle hurts. Pretty much anything that was below my nipples was really hurting. And at this point, the knee brace brigade has passed me because when I would come up to an aid station, I would just lay down. I would just lay on the ground, and they would be like, "Do you want us to get an ambulance?" I'm like, "No, I'll be okay." I'd lay on the ground. I'd sit there for a second, then I'd get up and I'd keep hobbling around. I remember as we kind of came back into town towards the end of the marathon, like I came around a corner and they were actually rolling up those little like flag, like on a string, like to know which they were rolling that up. And then they saw me and they rolled it back out again and applauded for me and then rolled it back up and went past me. I came in, it was about mile 22. And I must have, guys, I mean, I was walking, crawling, doing everything I could just to finish this race. And I came around the corner to go through this neighborhood at about mile 22, 23. And there was this old lady, she must have been in her 80s, sitting out or standing out in her lawn with a hose, just kind of watering the grass. And I was kind of going by her, and she didn't even ask me or say anything. She just looked at me and just started spraying me with the hose, just like, right? And the whole way, I wanted to quit 1,000 times. Those last 12 miles, I had to battle, and I had to remember why I was running, and I had to think about my kids, and I had to think about that moment at work, and I had to think about that over and over and over and over and over again. That was the only way I could keep myself going. In my experience, when you do that, when you do your part, the man upstairs has a way of kind of giving you some tender mercies every once in a while. And with your business or with other parts of your life, I'm just a big believer in that. I believe it, and no one can shake me from it. I had one of those moments. I passed mile 25 now, and I was the last part of this race was this straight that went just a little over probably quarter of a mile. Okay, the last 0.2 I would probably guess now. That was the straight street that went down kind of the main part of town. And it was lined with trees on both sides, and I'm sure it was supposed to be this picturesque ending, unless you were me and everyone else had basically gone home. Okay? But as I ran around that corner and I started going down that strip, I could see the finish line, the big banner that said finish, hanging up at the end of the road. And all of a sudden, right underneath that banner, this little girl ran out. She was wearing this pink hat. She was waving. And I looked at her, and it took me about 10 seconds to realize that was my daughter, Caitlin. My daughter, Caitlin, with her little pink hat, had run out into that middle of that road to wave to me. My wife had seen me coming, and she was so excited to see me that she ran out. And it was this beautiful image of her standing right under this finish line just waving, saying, "Come on, Dad, come on, you can make it." And if you don't think that meant the world to me after what I had just been going through, it did. And I'm crying for many reasons, but that was one of them as I was coming across that finish line. And as I came across the finish line, they had paramedics there. They had all kinds of stuff for me. And I just pushed them away. And I was like, leave me alone. I'm fine. I went and I grabbed my two babies. And I sat on that spot on that grass for like 2 hours. Okay. And I held them. And I didn't want to move. But I had finished that race. Okay. I'd finished that race. Now, as you go through this process that we're talking through, okay, taking these leaps of faith, overcoming obstacles, of being patient with yourself, with your imperfections as you're pushing yourself to grow and develop, there's a key step that has to take place for you. And that's step 5. That as you learn these lessons, you have to be conscious of the lessons that you're learning. And you have to let those increase the faith that you have in yourself, because that will increase the speed at which you can execute, the speed at which you can do things with your business, that you can act more decisively with your business. Don't make yourself learn the same lesson over and over and over and over and over again. You're better than that. Let those lessons be learned and consciously absorbed, so that now the next time you're faced with a similar situation, you can act more decisively, more quickly. So my wife and I now had the money. We flew the guy in from the East Coast. We had, we went through the whole procedure. They said weird things to us like, oh, you have really good eggs. Who says that, right? They said that to us, right? And they said we have 3 really good candidates, which felt really insensitive to me that those were my babies. But they sent us home with these little ultrasound images of these 3 eggs that they had implanted in my wife we would talk to Caleb and Caitlin about these being their brothers and sisters, and the picture sat on a place on our fridge, and we were just like, man, we have done everything. Okay, almost 2 years of saving everything we could do it for this moment right now. And 2 weeks after they implanted the eggs, we went back up there for a blood draw so they could then test if she was pregnant. They said, okay, we'll call you and let you know. Next day they call. I stay home from work. We're sitting out in front of our little apartment. Caleb and Caitlin are running around the grass. Katie's holding our cellular, the cordless phone. And the phone rings, and she looks up at me, and she nods her head. It's them. And literally my whole world just stops. It's just me and her. And she picks up the phone. She's like, hi, this is Katie. Oh, hi, Dr. So-and-so. Okay. Okay. No, that's okay. It's okay. Thank you. She hangs up the phone, and she starts to cry. She shakes her head. Didn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? No. That's not how this is supposed to work. That's not how this is supposed to be. All of a sudden I'm going, this and that, and I'm slipping again. I'm slipping into that mindset that I had when my babies were first, when I found out they had disabilities and all this kind of stuff was happening. I'm like, no. And then all of a sudden I was like, just stop, Kim, just stop. Stop. You know better now. You have faith. You know that this is what it's supposed to be. This is what it is. And so my wife and I, we held each other, we cried. And we said, we're going to give ourselves today to mourn this. And we did. Oh my gosh. We took that little ultrasound picture and we talked about them. We talked about all this stuff. We talked about the things that we had learned. We talked to Caleb and Caitlin a little bit about it, even though I don't think they really understood it too much. And then the next day we got up and we said, we made ourselves change the conversation to act in accordance with the faith and the understanding that we had built through the process, which was okay. Let's go look and see what adoption might look like. Because here's the deal, guys. You pay the $26,000, and it's not like you keep doing it until you get one. It's like you do it. Oh, you want to do it again? Great. It's another $26,000. And I just didn't know how we were going to do that again. And so we're starting to look at adoption. We were doing different things. And a month and a half later, we were down at her parents' house for Thanksgiving. And they had weaned her off of all the drugs you take, and she'd start on birth control and all this kind of stuff. And that morning, I remember the morning of Thanksgiving, I went out to play basketball with her brothers so that I could feel better about eating like 3 or 4 pies later on that day because I burned like 200 calories playing basketball. And so I came home from playing basketball, or came to her parents' house from playing basketball. And when you go to their house, you kind of walk in, and you go immediate right from the doorway, and then you go down a hallway. And where we were staying was the room at the end of that hallway. So I came in, I did that. As I turned, the floor was creaking. It's an old wood floor. And as I turned to go down that hallway, my wife came out of the bedroom, and she was holding something. And so I kind of walk up to her, and I'm just kind of looking at it. She goes, hey, and she hands it to me. And I take it from her, I look at it. It takes a second to register that it's a pregnancy test. So I drop it because I don't want to touch that. That's gross. And so it falls on the ground. As I look down on the ground at it, it's got 2 lines. And I look at her. I'm like, you're pregnant? She says, yeah. I was like, how? She goes like, and all of a sudden I was scared for like 2 seconds. And then I just felt so relieved. I was like, oh my gosh. Well, now I don't have to think about it anymore. This baby's coming. Like this baby, she's pregnant. It's coming. It's there. So anyway, make a long story short, a longer story, a little bit shorter, still long. We went to the doctor, the doctor, and he basically recommended we do an amniocentesis. And his thought was that way that if we found out ahead of time the child had the special needs, then we could kind of cope with that and deal with that instead of trying to deal with that at the same time as we're dealing with a newborn and everything else. So we went several months later, had the amniocentesis done. And again, here we are sitting in our house waiting for the doctor to call. And I'd taken the day off from work, and the doctor was supposed to call us that morning. And so I'd set up a dentist appointment that afternoon because, hey, if I was really going to be in pain, it might as well be, well-rounded pain. And so the doctor didn't call. Katie kept calling him. The doctor's been busy, but he's going to get to you. And so I got in the van. I'm like, look, we're just going to go. I'm going to go to the dentist real quick. It's just a cleaning, and then I'll come back. And I get in the car, and I drive, and I'm in the road to the dentist, and all of a sudden my little clam phone rings. It's my cell phone. And I look, it's my wife, and I answer. I was like, hey, Katie. And she's crying. And I'm like, oh, hell no. No. And when she can finally talk, it took her about 10 seconds. She just says, he's okay. And I'm like, what? She goes, he's okay. Joshua's okay. He's okay. He's fine. He doesn't have it. And I pull over on the side of the road, and I'm bawling like crazy, and she's bawling like crazy. And I walk in the dentist's office, my eyes are red, and they're like, oh, no, it's not going to hurt. And I'm like, no, I'm not worried about that. And anyway, so our son Joshua was born to us. And then we moved out to New York. And that's why he's wearing that I Love New York hat, because being a super husband that I was, 3 weeks after my wife had a baby, I moved them from Utah to New York, from a place where she had lots of family to a place where she had no family to raise our kids. And while we were in New York, again, while Joshua was just about a year old, we started thinking about it. We're like, okay, I think our family's not done yet. I think we're trying to figure out what to do. And all of a sudden I came home from work one day, instead of handing me the pregnancy test, she threw it at me because it was my fault. And we were pregnant again.
Oh my God.
And I was like, okay, we're okay. This is what this is, right? And so I remember we were driving a few weeks, 9 months later, my daughter Elizabeth was born, my New York baby, what we call her. She's born in New York. And they pricked her heel. We didn't do an amniocentesis this time because there's a risk of miscarriage. And we're like, we're good. Like we at this point, we have learned faith. It doesn't require as much out of us to go through this process anymore. And I remember we were driving home from Coney Island with my daughter and with my kids. I was sitting in the front. My wife was in. Caleb and Caitlin were in the 2 middle seats in the van, and Katie was in the back seat with the baby in the baby seat. And her phone rings, and she looks up at me, and it's the doctor. Now, notice this time we're not sitting around a house home stewing about it. We went to Coney Island that day, and she answers the phone, and I'm just watching her in my rearview mirror, and she's like, "Hi, this is Katie. Hi, Doctor So-and-so. Okay. All right, thank you so much." And then she basically hangs with the phone. She just looks at me in the rearview mirror and just gives me one of these. And so then we start talking, and we're crying and all this stuff. And Heavenly Father's keeping me from crashing because I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm looking in the rearview mirror the whole time. But the point is, so here's my family. And when I think about being that 27, 26, 5, 6, 7-year-old guy at the beginning of this story, if you would have shown me this picture, I would have said, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. That's my why. That's my purpose. That's what I want to have. That's what I want. But what I didn't know was the path I'd have to take to earn that. What I'd have to do to really to have something of lasting value like this. It's never given to you. It's something that you have to earn. And it's the same way with a business. Things in life that are of lasting value aren't given, they're earned, guys. They're earned. This is what I wanted. I just didn't know what I'd have to go through to get that. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's every bit and more than I hope. I would take the special ability. I would take the special needs away from my oldest kids if I could, in a heartbeat, because it's hard for them. But I'd never change it for me or my family, because it's a blessing to us. It's made us better because of that. One of my favorite quotes is this one by Anais Nin. Because sometimes the temptation, whenever you're going after these goals or doing these things and you're facing the headwinds and having to overcome the obstacles and going through the work and the process of earning and winning that prize, it's so valuable to you. There's temptations in there to just say, you know what, I'm done. Like, I just want to shrink within myself. That's why I love this quote. It says, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Because there's risk either way, you guys. There's risk either way. But the thing that I've learned is the greater risk is playing small. It's feeling like we do the world a service by not living up to what our potential can be. The decisions that you make at this retreat and other things going forward, at other opportunities like this, those decisions are how you don't play small. Those decisions make a difference. They matter to you. The decisions that you'll make this week will matter. And it doesn't mean that it's just going to be laid out in front of you. In fact, it probably won't be. If it's that important to you, it's not going to be. It won't be handed to you. But if you want it, if you're willing to own it, if you're willing to take on the responsibilities of the choices that you make sure those are aligned to the direction that you want to go, and then you're going to be consistently engaging those things, then you'll get there. I've seen it too many times, time and time again, that you will get there. But it won't happen without a plan. It won't happen without a purpose. And it won't happen without the activities and the consistency behind it to make it happen. Okay? And that might make some of you a little bit uncomfortable. It might put some of you in a place where you're not used to doing that just yet. That's okay. You'll get there. You'll get there. But I can promise you this, it's worth it. It's worth it. All right. That's all I got. So I'm happy to answer any questions or anything you might. But speaking of my kids, so my oldest son Caleb, he's actually got his Special Olympics basketball tournament up in Salt Lake this week. So I got to leave here, but I do have about 5-10 minutes. I can answer questions if you want or whatever.
You made us laugh and cry many times.
What's that?
You made us laugh and cry many times.
Well, the reason why I tell this story is obviously because of what it taught me, but the principles are what I hope you remember. I hope the story helps the principles stick. At the next time that you feel like that maybe you walked away from your business for a little while or whatever, you've made that wrong turn like I did, and you're sitting on the asphalt feeling sorry for yourself, wondering what you should do. That, yeah, it's hard to get your butt up off the asphalt and start running back, but that's what you got to do. You know, or whatever takeaway you have, I still pull from that experience, as you can tell to this day. I mean, it's definitely shaped me. That time period really shaped me because I learned a lot about what it was to actually own something, be committed to something in a way that I never had before.
How did you find Beachbody?
What's that?
How did you find Beachbody?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
How did you come to Beachbody?
How did I come to Beachbody? So I knew Jeff Hill. I've worked with Jeff Hill before in the past. He and I worked together at a previous company. And when he left that company, I actually took his spot at that company. And he and I just stayed in contact over the years. And I was always just really impressed with Beachbody. I mean, guys, this is a very unique company. It is very, very unique. And it's awesome. I mean, people would die to have what we take for granted. And so after about a little over 2 years ago now, we were at lunch and I was kind of between commitments and done other stuff. And he said, hey, I've got this. I'd love to have you on the team. I've got this. I think I can make it work for you. It's a little bit, whatever. And it did. And here I am.
Does anyone else have any questions for me? No.
They're like, he's been talking for an hour. How are we supposed to ask a question after he's been talking for an hour?
We really, really appreciate your sharing. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Oh, you're good, you guys. Just make those choices, okay? You got this.
Thank you. Thank
See you soon. Bye now.
Bye.